Hello and welcome to Youth Tech Gaming. My name's Dustin and today I'm going to be doing a review on Guild Wars 2. This review will focus on 4 things that I think are most important to touch on: gameplay, graphics, content, and combat, and it will show what is good and bad about them.
I just want to make a note that this is my personal views on the game and how it's going right now.
First on my list is gameplay. Gameplay in Guild Wars 2 is very diverse. There's a lot of things in Guild Wars 2 that aren't in many other games, such as their leveling system. The leveling system in Guild Wars 2 is unlike anything that's ever been done before. It's pretty much the same concept as questing, except it eliminates the back and forth, go kill something, go pick something up, and then bring it back to me. It eliminates that whole thing, where you just go in, find the heart, do what the heart wants you to do, automatically completes it for you, and then you can just go on to your next heart. I find it a very good system, but I feel like it's kind of grindy. Unlike most games, where you have up to like 30 skills on your bar, Guild Wars 2 limits you down to 10. 5 of your main weapon skills, 4 of your utility skills, and 1 heal skill. It can be good and it can be bad, that you have a lot less skills. I personally find it kind of boring. I end up using the same skills a million times and then you just get bored. But it's also good because it's not as confusing as having 30 skills on a board. Soloing and bosses in general in Guild Wars 2 are very fun and engaging. Most of them require you to dodge certain attacks, and if you don't, you're probably going to die or get down. Especially if you're by yourself and you don't dodge almost every single attack, you're gonna get hit really hard and you might not recover from it, which makes boss fights really engaging because you don't have a healer and you don't have a tank. When you don't have a tank to take hits for you, you have to watch what you're doing. The boss could jump at you at any moment and you could die. And being your own healer, you have to make sure you use your heal skills at the right times so you don't waste them and then you end up dying later. It makes the game all completely diverse and entertaining, but also makes it challenging at the same time. A few bad things about not having a tank or healer means that there's other ways around killing bosses as a group. A few of these tricks that people have come up with is stacking, and although it's a very effective way of doing dungeons quickly, I personally hate it. A lot of people say I'm wrong, I'm dumb, but stacking is very boring to me. It makes the game go too easy and you don't really do anything. You're just stacking in a corner and spamming your buttons instead of actually dodging skills. Other than that, that's my good and bad about gameplay. Next, I'll move on to graphics. Next on my list is graphics. There's not much to say about graphics other than the fact that there's no real middle to it. It's either really, really good or really, really bad. Not saying that having a bad computer means you're going to have a bad experience playing the game. It just means you're not going to have amazing graphics. The game is very graphic intensive, meaning having a good computer means you're going to have a really good experience, but where having a not so great computer means you're going to have an okay experience. You're not going to have the amazing backgrounds and great graphics, but you're still going to have a pretty fun time. Personally, I started with a bad computer, so I know what it's like having good and bad in Guild Wars 2. And personally, I feel like the graphics really help with the experience of the game, but it's not the main experience of the game. The main experience is really the content and the gameplay. So, having a bad computer doesn't mean you're going to have a bad experience. So with that said, I'm going to move on to content.
Next on my list is content. There's an unbelievable amount of content in this game, from PvP to dungeons to even living story. First, I'll start with PvP. PvP in Guild Wars 2 is really interesting. They have a whole world just for PvP, and you can go into that world at any point of your leveling system, even if you're level 1. Once you leave the starting area, you can go right into PvP. You only have to level up to level 80. PvP is basically skill based. You have the exact same stats, same gear, same everything. Hit the same amount, you just have to know how to play your class. So if you're good at your class, then you're going to be good at PvP. And the best thing I liked about playing PvP is that you can play in little like arenas where you can have 5 of your friends come in with you, and that's what I mainly did when I PvP'd. I didn't PvP much by myself. I just pretty much played with my friends in the PvP arenas, which is really fun. Next I'm going to talk about dungeons. Dungeons in Guild Wars 2 are really interesting. There's only 8 dungeons in the game, but there's 25 paths. Each dungeon has 3 paths. One of them has 4 paths, but that's the last dungeon, the one you do at level 80, and it has a 4th path to make it harder. Once you've done all of these dungeons, I'm gonna say it gets really boring. You can do them over and over and over and over again to get gold and the tokens to get your gear. Once you've done that over and over again, it gets really boring. Me and my friends used to farm dungeons all day to make gold and stuff, but it got really boring for me, so I stopped. Up until a few months ago, the dungeons were pretty much the end of the game, where you'd only have, once you got to level 80, you pretty much only had dungeons to do. And once you've done them a bunch of times, it gets really boring, and you didn't really have anything to do. There's also a dungeon-like instance, which is sort of like a dungeon, but not really. It's basically a instance you go into where you get all your friends together, you go in, and then you go through 3 stages of a fractal, which are 3 like stories that happen in past, present, or future that could happen to the game. It's just like a fun storytelling type thing where you go through, you kill a few bosses, and then you leave to the next one. It's basically like a dungeon, but it's a bit harder, and it scales up as you get further into it. There's also Living Story in the game. Living Story is content that updates every 2 to 3 weeks, and basically it's a story that continues to update. You're basically following your character and how his path to victory is, going from a commoner to a commander, and then going from a commander to saving the world, killing a few dragons. It's really interesting, and I love the story into it, but the living world part of it is really boring, because you can complete all the achievements and everything else within a day, and once you do that, all the content's pretty much just there to farm, which isn't that bad, but it's still, I really wish they would update it and make it more interactive, because there is a lot of content, it's just mostly there just to farm gold and stuff. With all that said, I'm going to move on to combat.
Last on my list is combat. Combat in Guild Wars 2 is very interesting. It's very unique in the way that they have it set up, but it's not completely unique because it's still like other games. It's kind of like most MMO game setups, but with a little twist. Basically, the combat is completely set on what weapon you have. They also have different skills if they're in your main hand or your offhand. So there's a lot of combinations and other types of skills you can use for where you put your weapons. There's also weapon switches, so you can have 2 sets of weapons or 2 two-handed weapons on you. You just switch them every 5 seconds, and that leads to a whole bunch of different combinations you can do. Guild Wars 2 has brought a new system to underwater combat. There's 3 weapons for underwater combat, but not all classes can use them, so you have different sets for different classes. Basically, underwater combat is a system that they made for underwater only, where when you go underwater, your weapon switches to whatever weapon you choose for your underwater combat. It's a diverse way of fighting underwater, and with the whole combat system, they've made dodging, which I've talked about dodging before, but I'll talk about it again here. Dodging is a very needed thing in the game, because you fight a lot of hard enemies that pretty much one-shot you. So if you don't dodge those skills, you will go down, and if you don't have someone to res you, or if you can't get up in time, you're gonna die. There's also a down system, which I haven't talked about. The down system in Guild Wars 2 is very interesting. It's it's basically a system that happens right before you die. When you hit 1 health, you'll go down, and when you go down, you're basically fighting to survive. You have to if you kill the person or enemy that you're fighting while you're down, you'll get up. If you kill an enemy or anything around you, you'll get up. Or if someone comes over and reses you, you'll get up. Basically, the down system's a second wind. It's basically a way to save you from dying instantly. And I don't see the down system really in any other game. At least not many other games, which I really wish it was. And although the combat system and all that's really fun, it's kind of boring with the whole only 5 skills. So dodging's fun, the combat is interesting and everything, but you still only have 5 skills, which I find is still boring. Also the fact that the UI is very, very basic. There's almost no customization with it, which I hate. There's almost nothing that you can change with it. It's a very good UI. I liked how they made it, but I wish it was more customizable. And that's my review on Guild Wars 2. So that's the end of my review. If you've made it to the end, what would be very helpful if you went down and left some comments on what you liked, disliked, something you might want me to change in the future, or maybe a game you want me to do. I'd love to hear some feedback, especially because this is my first video and I just want to know what I could do to make it better. I know it wasn't the best, so I would love to hear some feedback to know what I should change in the future. If you liked it, like it. If you dislike it, dislike it. And don't forget to check out the rest of our videos on our channel. We don't only do gaming videos, we also do some tech videos. So check that out and see you around.